It looked like the longest war on this side of the planet had finally ended.
For 52 years, the Colombian government has been fighting a civil war against the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, Marxist leftist guerrilla organization that has been bloody and horrible, has cost over 220,000 lives and displaced over 5 million people.
This has been going on since 1964, and peace negotiations have been in progress for 4 years in Havana, Cuba. Finally, in June, there was a breakthrough.
Signed a ceasefire agreement today. For more on this, I'm joined now by Alvaro.
In September, President Santos of Colombia and Timochenko, the leader of the FARC, both signed the deal.
It was a historic peace agreement. Leaders and heads of state from all over the world came together. It was a massive celebration. All that was left was to put it to a vote to the people.
It was a formality, part of the deal. The polls showed it winning. The deal was going to pass.
And it didn't. Everyone was wrong. All the polls were wrong. It was a really close vote. 50.2% voted against it.
Why would Colombians vote against such a momentous peace agreement? There are a few reasons. And to understand, let's go back to 1964.
In the mid-60s, there were a lot of leftist, Marxist, communist-type rebellions, particularly in South America and Latin America.
You might recognize this guy. Or this one. They took over nearby Cuba.
The FARC claimed to represent the interests of a lot of the rural people in Colombia.
There was intense inequality. Here's an example. 0.2% of farms owned 30% of farmland. This inequality had fueled a previous civil war from 1946 to 58, too, with 2 million peasant farmers forced off their land. Manuel Shoreshot Marulanda took up their cause, forming FARC in the 60s after a government assault on communist groups. He wanted the government to redistribute land back to the poor and rid the country of multinational companies. But they ended up funding their fight in horrifying ways.
The FARC specifically got especially powerful and wealthy from capitalizing on the drug trade. So taking a lot of the wealth from the drug trade and using that to kind of funnel back into their rebellion.
They used kidnappings and ransoms this way too. Some of the kidnapped were forced to fight.
They recruited child soldiers. There was a lot of sexual violence, a lot of rape.
All of this should give you a sense why many Colombians opposed the specifics of the peace deal. The FARC agreed to end their drug trafficking, to give away their weapons.
Ofrezco sinceramente perdón a todas las víctimas del conflicto.
They do community service, removing their landmines.
Por todo el dolor que hayamos podido causar en esta guerra.
They have to turn over all of their weapons to special UN inspectors who would be on the ground.
But in return, they'd face no jail time. The FARC would also get 5 guaranteed seats in each of Colombia's 2 houses of Congress, and financial aid for fighters who demobilize.
The groups on the right and the government also engaged in plenty of crimes, so it wasn't just the FARC.
This sounded like justice and forgiveness to some. But to others, it sounded like surrender. The previous president of Colombia, Uribe, led the campaign to vote against the deal.
He said repeatedly that he wasn't against peace. He wasn't against a peace agreement in principle.
In fact, he had led a crackdown on the FARC that had brought them to the negotiating table in the first place, with heavy support from the US government.
Top leadership was killed. A lot of people demobilized, disarmed. They went from something like 20,000 fighters at their peak to down to between 6,000 and 7,000 fighters. It was effective, kind of brought them to the negotiating table.
Uribe clearly wasn't satisfied by the negotiations' outcome. This tweet is representative. With these agreements, there is no justice nor truth. But the thing is, if you look at a map of how people voted, some of the areas that were hardest hit by the conflict, they voted yes most strongly. In Boyaha, the site of one of the FARC's worst massacres, a bombing of a church and 119 dead, 96% voted for the peace agreement.
And now everything is in complete disarray. It's unclear what's going to even happen. But at this point, they cannot implement the peace agreement as agreed.
At least one thing is sure. The FARC and Colombia have not gone back to war. At least not yet. A ceasefire is still in effect.
Reafirmamos ante Colombia y el mundo que sus frentes guerrilleros en todo el país permanecerán en cese al fuego bilateral y definitivo como una necesaria medida de alivio a las víctimas del conflicto y en respeto a lo acordado con el gobierno nacional.
And Santos, the current president, and Uribe, the former who opposed the deal, met for the first time in 6 years and vowed to work toward peace. Given anyone under 60 in Colombia has basically only known a country at war, let's hope they succeed.
Yo tengo 56 años y de ellos todos los años vividos en la guerra. Tengo tanta emoción que tengo la esperanza de que la generación más joven pueda disfrutar día a día el valor de la vida.